We'll try that.
Okay. I first want to say thank you to these guys because we've been doing this for a year, showing up every single week. I've been here almost every single week filming, and I feel lucky because I get to film and learn, but then I also get to go back and edit, and then I like relearn again other things. So I feel super blessed from this group and thankful to these four for stepping up and putting this on because I know it's a ton of work to do, and I'm glad I don't have to do it. This morning when I woke up, I asked my wife, like, I don't know how far back in my story I should go because some of the speakers that have spoke, I relate most to hearing their story. Like there's some that just tell numbers. It's like numbers are great, but I like when I can connect with someone on a different level emotionally or on a personal level. And that helps me feel and know and like and trust them. So I'm going to go all the way back to high school because I played basketball in high school, pretty high level. I lettered all 3 years in high school and was the captain of our team. We was supposed to be a pretty good team our high school year. Everyone in the state was picking us to win state. And I had a few, our best player, he went and played at Weber State, then Oklahoma, and then he went and played overseas in Germany. But
Was this at Clearfield High?
Clearfield High.
Go Falcons.
Some people I went to school with at Clearfield. So anyways, played at a high level, was super competitive, but I learned a lot from sports. And it taught me how to work hard and how to fail, mainly in front of a lot of people and not care about it. So we went to the state playoffs and we played CJ Wilcox and his cousin. If you don't know who CJ Wilcox is, he was drafted number 28 in the NBA draft by the LA Clippers. Then he went to play Portland with the Portland Trailblazers, Indiana, one other team. He kind of bounced around the league. But anyways, these guys, we matched up with them, and I had to guard CJ Wilcox all game. And he was by far the best player I've ever guarded. And I wasn't an offensive powerhouse because we had 4 other guys to do that. So my job was to stop the other best player. And I think he still dropped 20 on me. But we ended up winning that game. And me and my best friend guarded him and his cousin. And it was a huge win for us. We weren't supposed to win because he was highly recruited. He played at Washington, was their best player. But we won. And that was a moment that I was super proud of because I always loved the underdog story. I've been a Jazz fan my whole life. I feel like they're always underdogs. My grandpa here had season tickets during the John and Carl days, and he flew to Chicago not with the team, but he went to every single game and flew back. So he cursed me being a Jazz fan.
Long life of misery.
But basketball has been a huge part of my life, and the reason I tell that story is not to brag that I played against be like back in my day I played against an NBA player, but once basketball was over, my senior year, my parents were going through a divorce, and we had a really big game, and basketball was something where it was always an outlet for me to go blow off steam or focus in on something and forget about everything else. But I remember I was sitting in the locker room for one of the biggest games. I think it was against Davis High, and I just was totally blanked out. Like I didn't even care about the game because my family was getting a divorce. And it was like, I'm losing my family. Like, why does this basketball game even matter? And so once basketball was over, I kind of lost my identity. Like I didn't know what to do with my life. And then I'd lost my family. So I got into a really dark place. I was actually working at Burt Brothers Tires. Nate, you probably remember this because I delivered tires to you and your brother at your mechanic shop. I hated that place and started getting into drinking, smoking, partying, tattoos. And really, I just think anything to feel something, like even pain. Like I fell asleep during my tattoo, but I was addicted to the pain almost. Like it felt good to feel something. So it was a really dark time in my life. And then my dad ended up getting remarried, and he remarried into a family where the lady that he married, they had a gene from her ex-husband. I wish I knew what the name was, but they basically can't fight off cancer. They get cancer like we get colds almost. So I met my siblings, or my step-siblings. My stepmom had lost her 3-year-old daughter to cancer before meeting my dad. My stepsister had her eye removed, so she has a fake eye. She had her breast removed because she had cancer. She's still alive. And then I watched my brother, he was 15 at the time, go through chemo. He had to have his leg amputated. It got in his spine, his lungs. But watching him, this is the same time I'm working at Burt Brothers, watching him go through all of that as a 15-year-old changed a lot of my perspective on life, because this kid was suffering. He knew he was going to die, yet he was happy, and he was rock climbing. He would go skiing with one leg, and I started filming stuff for him. And I was lucky enough to be in the room with him when he took his last breath. And it was, I don't know if you've been around someone when they're actually dying. It was hard to get words out, so it was almost like I was talking to him through my mind. Like I knew he could hear me and I could hear him. And I just said, "It's okay, Dallin. It's okay to let go." And he took his last breath. And the room just filled with light after that. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. And at that time, I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe in people. I didn't know why I was alive. And so I looked across the room at my stepmom, and as he was gone, she just was happy. Like, I think she was happy, one, because her boy wasn't suffering anymore, but it was like, I looked at her and it was like, she knows something that I don't know. Like, how is she happy in this moment? I don't understand. And so before my brother passed, he had a Make-A-Wish Foundation to go to Hawaii. And they invited me to go, and I said no, because at the time I was so worried about bills and making money just to survive that I said no. I can't afford to go and take time off of work. And so I didn't go. And when he passed, I really regretted it. It's probably one of my biggest regrets. Like, I look back and I don't know what I was thinking, right? And I think a lot of us get blinded by money that way. And in stressful moments, we're all stressed by bills and need to make ends meet. So anyways, I decided, screw it. I am going to go see if life is worth living. Like, I already don't want to live, so let's go do something adventurous. And I sold everything that I owned. Like, I had Jazz jerseys that I thought I was going to keep forever, and I was just giving them away to friends. Like, material stuff no longer mattered to me. And I sold everything I owned. I bought a one-way ticket. I had 0 plans. And I took a backpack with like 3 board shorts and 3 shirts. And that was it. I just planned on living out of my backpack. And I remember telling my family and friends, Braden and Nate, I was living with Braden and Nate, you weren't living with us. I was living with Braden at the time with a few other guys, and like, what are you doing? And like my friends and family, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm leaving. Like I'm going to figure out life. And I remember my mom drove me to the airport just in tears, so scared for me. But it was really, for me, a way to try to reconnect with my brother, but also, like, are humans good people? Was something that I was questioning. Like, is there good in humanity? And then I also wanted to see if God was real. So I remember vividly on my plane ride over, I took a notepad or a journal, and I'd been trying to clean up my life before this. I got into hot yoga, trying to eat healthy, meditate, and I had a lot of really powerful spiritual moments before Hawaii. But on the plane ride over, I just wrote in my journal, God, if you're real, take control of every step, every breath, every decision that I make, because I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm scared out of my mind, flying across the ocean to do who knows what. And from the moment I landed in Hawaii, sorry, I tried to cry before I got here. From the moment I landed in Hawaii, God had my back the whole time. I didn't have a cell phone, anything, but there's just moments that I wish I had time to explain, and sometimes I explain it and people think I'm nuts anyways. But like just as simple as like, should I turn left or right here? And one time I turned left, right? Like I felt like I should go this way, and like I know that he was protecting me from something. Like there was times that I ran into Hawaiians, and because I was a haole, a white boy with a backpack, like I know they wanted to jump me. And like there were multiple moments, and he protected me somehow. I don't know. So that was really the turning point in my life. Finding God and like finding purpose again. And I was not planning on ever coming back. I worked on farms, organic farms, like down in the dirt for 10 hours a day, and your back is just killing you. You're harvesting. I learned to harvest from this Chinese guy that spoke no English. The only way I learned what was good and no good is how and bu hao, which is good and bad in Chinese. And then if I was doing something wrong, he'd like freak out on me in Chinese. Like, and I was like, dude, I don't know what you're saying. And so the guy that owned the farm, we got to talking, and I was like, yeah, he'll go off on me. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, well, the more you smile and laugh, the dumber he thinks you are. I'm like, well, he thinks I'm an idiot because anytime he yells at me, I start smiling and laughing. But I slept in cars with homeless people. I stayed on a hippie commune. Like it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And I think it was so eye-opening for me because I had to get away from everything that I knew to find me. Like I had to get away from my friends, my family, my surroundings, just to find out who is Jordan and what does Jordan want out of life. And so I got this feeling that I needed to come home, and at this point I was just going a lot off of feeling, like intuition or spirit, whatever you guys want to call it, universe. That's how I was living. And so I just said, okay, I'll buy a plane ticket back. I don't know why I'm going back. But now I know. My wife she's from California, and she was student teaching here for just a short period of time. How long was it, babe? Like 4 months. Okay, so I came back in that 4-month span and met her at church, and she's been sorry. She's been a rock for me ever since. And even through this flip that I'm about to talk about, I think there's a saying or so, like I've read this multiple spots that like any great man, there's a great woman behind it. And I know a lot of people are here saying they are here for me, but like I couldn't do it without her. So thank you. So anyways, I get back, I get married, we have a kid, and she had lived in Hawaii a little bit as well, and so that was kind of our connection, and I was like, it'd be great if we could go back and live in Hawaii. So I applied to BYU Hawaii, got accepted to BYU Hawaii, and again, we were planning on selling all of our things. We were literally in the process of selling all of our things. I was selling cars over at John Watson Chevrolet, and I had just gotten a Harley because I didn't know how to handle having a kid. Like it stressed me out. So my Harley was my release, and she didn't want me to get it, and I went and bought it anyways. And Nate, my mechanic friend right here, who works, are you still at John Watson? He's like their top mechanic over there. He got a bike with me, and we went almost every night up Trapper's Loop. And man, it was just like so freeing and so amazing. So one day, we were selling our couch. I actually remember this. And I was coming home to sell our couch. I was driving. Anybody?
Who's messing in order real fast?
I was driving home from work. You guys know where John Watson Chevrolet is it on Riverdale or Washington? So where Riverdale turns into 40th Street, and like there's that weird intersection right there by the Subaru dealership and Jimmy John's. I was sitting at that light, and it's a two-way road, or it's really a one-way, but with two lanes that go up. So I was in the left-hand side. A car came off Riverdale Road, and my light turned green, so we turned. Usually there's a hill to get up, and I usually speed up so one, cars can see me because I'm on a bike, but also to get up the hill so my bike doesn't bog down. Sitting at the light was the last thing that I remember. She thought traffic was coming this way at us, and she turned into my bike. I hit her car door and flew 30 feet over her car, and it was a nice day that day, so that day I decided not to wear my helmet. I put it in my saddlebag. I was always wearing my helmet, but that day I'm like, oh, I've done this, I know this drive. It's a nice day, I'm gonna let my hair blow in the wind, and that was a bad decision. So I brought my iPad just to share pictures. Because again, this was 2019, so it's been 5 years. And this will actually tie into my flip story if you're like, what the heck, we came to learn about real estate. So here I am, if you guys can see it, after I got hit, I crushed the whole left side of my head and my face, my orbital bone. So they had to shave. Babe, you'd probably tell this story better than me because you were awake. So I went into McCady Hospital. Luckily, I was so close to a hospital, or I would have died. My brain started swelling to the point where the lines in your brain, they started to disappear, and that's like fatal. So they tell, I don't know the whole story, but they tell my wife, hey, we need to do a surgery. Basically, they had to take, you can see I have a mohawk looking thing. That's actually my skull. So they had to take both sides of my skull out to let my brain swell and then put it back in. So we had an amazing surgeon there. So like, this is like, to me, God saved my life like multiple times, not just the accident, but like before when I didn't want to live. Like had that surgeon not been there, there was also a lady at the accident scene that was like holding my skull together. And she was a nurse. And so it's like, had all those things not lined up, I would be dead. I would not be here. And so to me, this, I don't know how, but like, I feel like God saved me for some reason. And I changed my whole life for God, basically. And so once I came out of this, I was really pissed off at him. Like, you know, I changed my whole life. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I stopped doing these things that you don't want me to do, and this is how I get repaid. Like, I was supposed to go to BYU Hawaii, and like, couldn't you just have like made that lady not hit me? And so, I still struggle with that sometimes. Like, especially when things get hard, it's like, why couldn't you just taken me then? And I'm sure we've all hit a point like that. Like, why is this so hard? What's the point? So I was in a coma for 3 weeks, and then I was in the hospital for another, was it 4 weeks? Rehabbing, and I had to relearn everything. I had to relearn how to talk, walk, eat, breathe, everything. So I wanted to share these. I felt like they'd hit home. They're just short little videos. This is me trying to say my daughter's name, hooked up to a bunch of tubes. I hope you can hear it.
There you go. We got this. Jordan, you're the cutest. You say Sloan? Good job.
So at this point, oops, I could remember these things happening. I remember thinking, like the first time I actually was able to get up, I had a video of me trying to walk. I couldn't walk, but when I rewatched that video, my wife's saying in it, I think it's his trach, what helped me breathe, is bothering him. But I went up to walk and I realized I couldn't walk. And my face, like you could see, just like so disappointed in myself. And my wife was saying, I think his trach's hurting him. That's why his face is like that. And I couldn't talk. But I thought, no, it's not. I can't walk. And right at that moment, I was like determined to walk. And I could see the determination on my face. And I was on like every type of drug. But I think a lot of that's why I tell my basketball story. I think going through sports and learning those difficult situations and how, like, the determination it takes to be a top athlete, I think that's what was coming out of me, the competitive side. Like, because the doctor said I'd be a vegetable, and I'm sure I heard that, and it's like, no, I'm not. I've never believed doctors, and still to this day, my wife tries to get me to go to the doctor, and I said, no, I'm not going to a doctor. They fill you with a bunch of shit. They do. And so I remember this moment vividly. This is my daughter Sloan. She's now 6. But when I saw her, I was hooked up to all these tubes, still couldn't talk. I just thought, man, that motorcycle was not worth it. Like, and I knew how dangerous motorcycles were, but that moment will stick with me forever. So after I started healing, it took me about a year to recover. And like, a lot of people see those videos and say that must have been so hard, but being in the hospital wasn't the hard part, because there was therapists there, speech therapists, doctors. I could press a button, they'd feed me. The hard part was going home, because now all the support was gone, and everyone that had came to the hospital had now forgotten that you were in an accident and you're alone in your own thoughts. My wife had to work, and I was just sitting at home for like a whole year, like wondering, am I ever going to be able to help her again? Am I know this is stupid, going to be able to shoot a basketball? Like, that was one of my main thoughts, because basketball's so therapeutic for me. And so anyways, fast forward, I got better. Obviously, I'm here. But I decided my first job after that was in insurance. I decided I was going to go into insurance because my story would relate with people that I was talking to about insurance. I was hit by a lady that was underinsured. So we got like nothing. We got a little bit from our insurance company. But my medical bills came to over $1 million. And we had to hire a lawyer that was a really good lawyer to help us. So anyways, I got into insurance and was trying to tell my story, like, hey, you need better insurance, because if someone hits you that's underinsured, here's why. And people don't care. They just want to save money on insurance. And so I got burnt out really fast and really bored of it. And so I told my wife, I think I want to get into real estate. And Devin is my daddy. So I'd followed him from when we met. Wow, I feel like it was 20 years ago. Probably like 23.
About 15-ish?
So, yeah, I kind of watched him through my recovery. Obviously, you're on social media and see friends, but I saw him probably over a year, 2-year span, just keep doing deals, keep posting about his real estate. And so he was the first person that came to mind. He was like, hey, I want to get in real estate. I think you came and picked me up, or we drove around in my car, your car, talking about it. And I was like, I need a mentor. Like, here's my situation. I just had a brain injury. I just had an accident. Like, I doubt myself. Like, I need a mentor. So anyways, while I was selling insurance, I had my cell phone here on Artie Academics with the insurance or the real estate classes playing and selling insurance. And so I'd watch the videos when someone would answer, because I'd cold call almost all day. I'd pause the video, I'd sell insurance, and then I'd drop it and I'd go back to my real estate videos. Bye, Courtney. And I was their top salesman in the region when I was there, but it was so boring. I hated it. So I told my wife, I was like, once I get licensed, are we okay on time? Okay. Once I get licensed, like once I finish these classes, I'm quitting insurance. She's like, okay. And she was teaching at Farmington Junior High at the time, so I had the luxury of doing that because she was our main income at the time. So got my license. I've been a realtor for 3 years. I don't love being a realtor. It was nice. Like when the market was hot, it was awesome. And that's when I got in. So I got in at a really good time. And then the market kind of switched and interest rates went up, and the 3% interest rates honestly screwed up everything, in my opinion. And so I thought I need to be able to figure out how to help people still buy a home or sell a home in this market. So that's when I came across Pace Morby's group. And let me reverse a little bit, because I'm all over the place. So when I was working insurance, my buddy had already gotten into real estate. And so from this little amount of money that we had from our insurance claim or our lawyer. I was like, I would love to invest in real estate. So we went up to a family cabin in Bear Lake, and we were just driving around looking at lots. I was like, it'd be awesome to buy a lot up here and build a cabin one day. So we started calling on all these lots, asking what the prices were. And I found a couple, and I called my buddy. I said, hey, let's just put in an offer. He's like, well, what do you want? What do you want to do? Like, what's your offer? I'm like, I don't know. I heard seller financing's pretty good. And I had no idea what seller financing was. Maybe Devin, I don't know who told me, or maybe I listened to a podcast, something. So he's like, dude, I've never done a seller finance deal. I'm like, neither have I, but just ask if they're open to it. And so he called them and said, hey, are you open to seller financing? They said, yes. What does your buyer want? So he came back to me. I said, I don't know. Ask them what they want. And so they came back and said, we want $9,000 down payment and interest-only payments for 5 years. I was like, that sounds good. We could do that. I'm like, so what would my interest-only payments look like? And they're like $50 a month. I was like, let's do it. So that was my first, before I got my license, that was my first deal. And the reason I say that is because I think J.R. McLaughlin's always said, like, the only reason I'm not doing more business is because I'm not putting in enough offers. And Robert Kiyosaki says it too. Like, if you're failing at buying or investing in real estate, you're just not putting enough offers in. And I got pretty lucky because we didn't put very many. I think that was maybe our first one. But I look at that moment and think, like, how many people would love to own a piece of land for a Netflix subscription? Or, like, you know, we all pay for stupid subscriptions. I mean, I think we love them, like, you know, watching Netflix. We all would probably not want to stop watching Netflix or YouTube or whatever you do. But if you could invest that money into a piece of land, that piece of land, I have to pay it off this year, has appreciated probably $80,000 from $50 a month payments. So then I came across Pace Morby when the market turned. And when I watched his videos, I already kind of understood seller financing and subject to because I had bought a property that way. So I connected with him immediately. And if you know Pace Morby, he's like the king of subject to and seller financing. So I got into his community and started reaching out to people. Actually had a lady, we sold her house in Ogden on Washington Boulevard. It was in a trust, super old house, but I was pitching her seller finance, and she wasn't taking it, but she's like, I trust you and like you, like, can I list my house with you? So that was actually the last house I sold last December. And I question if I should tell the struggle because, like, everybody loves the awesome stuff, but, like, me and my wife struggled this whole year. Like, I haven't sold a house. That was like our income, right? And so we've been living off of our HELOC for almost the entire year. And last year I sold roofs for the summer just to bring in some income. I worked at MarketStar on a Google's Waze team just to, like, make ends meet. So sometimes I think it's necessary, like some of us just say I need to go all in, but sometimes it's necessary to do what you don't want to do. I hated both of those jobs, but it got us by. And I continued to research and learn in Pace Morby's group and connect. Networking I always thought was a bunch of BS, and here I am speaking at a networking event. But I saw the power of networking in Pace's group because there's so many high-level people all over the country. And that's actually how I was able to get into this flip deal. So the rest of the time, I want to tell about this flip that I just sold. Brett's been trying to get me to speak about it, and I said not until it closes because I
didn't want to jinx it.
I was scared out of my mind that the appraisal wasn't going to come in, or I don't know. Because you see deals fall apart all the time, and I didn't want that to happen. So I didn't want to jinx it. If you guys have been coming to this group at the beginning of the year, I got really into self-storage. I wanted to buy a self-storage facility, and I actually was under contract on 2 of them. But once I got under contract, I realized the capital it took, and I was trying to raise capital, but it's like I don't know how to raise capital either. So I had to back out, and that kind of made me reset. So the first 6-7 months of this year, I spent on acquiring a self-storage facility. I had kind of switched from being a realtor to now I want to invest, and that's pretty much backwards if you don't have the money. So I started researching because I've always heard, I think it's Robert Kiyosaki, using other people's money, right? Like, how do you use other people's money? And Pace Morby talks about $0 out of pocket, and it's like, those are so rare. But how do you do that? Like, I know it's possible. So I came across this company. There was an ad on my Instagram, probably from what I was searching online, basically saying, get business credit to fund your business. I was like, well, what if it's real estate, right? So I actually hired this company to help me get qualified for 150 grand in business credit. So I had an LLC already set up that I ran for real estate for 3 years. So that helped. Like, if you're going to just go get business credit, you still have to have like an LLC that has some type of money, or I had my taxes, right? So I hired them. I said, what's the catch? What's the deal? You'll pay us however much you want to get approved for. We can get you up to 500 grand, but whatever amount you get, you owe us, I think it was 2.9%. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go past 150 grand. So I had to go set up a Goldman Sachs account, a Chase account, like all these accounts, and then clean up your credit. They had me do all these things that I couldn't have done on my own, I believe. Maybe someone in this room is savvy enough to go do it and figure it out. But in my mind, I didn't want to spend my time researching how to do it. I'd rather pay somebody else to help me get it so that I didn't have to spend that time. And I could spend time on hunting deals still, what I was good at. So I get approved for 150 grand. I think it cost me like 3 grand. And I'd been coming to this for so long that I think just coming week after week after week, like who you're around, you start becoming like. I started thinking, oh, maybe I could do a flip. And my idea was to get capital to buy self-storage. So the deal that I found was actually from a kid that I had a class with at college. I have a social media marketing degree, and I've dropped out of college twice because I hate school, and my wife, being an educator, made me go back and get a degree.
Good job.
It's only an associate's degree, though, so.
Still counts.
So anyways, he got into real estate through Renatus, I believe, and then started wholesaling. He flips a little. But I went to this walkthrough, and guess who I ran into? Brett. Brett walked in right as I was walking out. I was like, oh, shoot, Brett's going to grab that one. And like the whole time I go back to Hawaii, like I go a lot off of feeling. The whole time I was walking in the house, I'm like, this is a deal. And I don't think I just got to that point. Like I have walked enough and lost out on enough deals that I think I got to the point where it's like, okay, I need to just do it. I need to take imperfect action. I have no idea what I'm doing. Kind of like when I flew over to Hawaii. I have no idea. I just have to do it, and I'm going to learn as I do it. So the next morning, I text Brett, and I said, hey, did you put an offer in on that house? He said, no. I can't remember the whole thing. And I said, oh. So I text the kid that I knew. I was like, hey, did you guys get that under contract? They were asking $620,000, and he said, yeah, we're about to accept an offer for, it was below 600. I was like, oh, dang, I could have beat that. He's like, well, what could you do? Because it's not under contract yet. I'm like, well, how about 5 grand more? And so he's like, okay. So I bought the property for 600,000. They were asking 620,000. So I think you can learn from that. Even if there's an asking price, like, you can always try. And in my mind, I thought Brett was going to buy it. So it's like the follow-up is super important. A lot of the times we just disregard it, like, oh, somebody else bought it, but you never know who's actually making offer, or maybe Brett's money was tied up in 3 other flips. So just because you run into someone at a property and you know that they're like high level doesn't mean that they're going to buy it before you. So make offers. So I bought it for 600, or let me back up. It was $5,000 earnest money, and this technically was the only money out of my pocket that I had to use. But like, if you want to get technical about it, since we were living off our HELOC, I actually pulled that from our HELOC. So it technically wasn't my money. So I guess this is a $0 out of my own pocket, technically. So we go under contract. There's due diligence. I think it was like 7 days. I didn't have a lender. So I start reaching out to lenders, and I finally picked one up. But most of them are 80 or 85%, maybe 90 if you're lucky. They'll pay for that, and then you have to come up with the 10%, 15 or 20% as the down payment. Well, I didn't have that either. So the day before closing, I didn't have a gap funder for the deal, meaning I didn't have a down payment. So Jamie probably remembers this. I said, I think I just lost us $5,000. And when you don't have a paycheck for an entire year, that's not what your wife wants to hear. And she said, well, why don't you reach out to Pace Morby's community? I said, I already did. Like, that was like the first place I went. And so late that night, I was like, I'll try it one more time. And Alex Murillo, he's down in St. George, is in Pace Morby's community. Ironically enough, his older brother was in my ward. And so he reached out to me and said, hey, I've got a guy for you. It's like, I need a gap lender. He's like, I've got a guy for you. And I got on the phone immediately. He's like, yeah, I'll give you the money you need. I'm the gap lender, and I have a hard money lender that will lend you money and won't require payments. I was like, done. Because like, holding costs on my other deal is a huge deal right now, right? It's, I don't know, depending on the size of the deal, $3, $4, $5 grand, $7 grand a month that you have to make those payments. So he's like, do you need rehab costs? I said, no, I've got $150K of business credit. I'll use that for my rehab costs. All I need is the hard money loan and the fund, or the gap funding. So we close on it. And literally like hours before the deal, I was still like questioning if it was a good deal. Like, it was just fear, like pushing through that fear and those limiting beliefs of, can I really do this? We're there, even at the signing table, I was like sweating. I'm like, gosh, I hope I made the right decision. And I have a picture, I'll never forget this. The guy that I closed with, because the seller got a pick, his name was Thor. So there's me and Thor. Thor's giving me the keys to the house. Okay. So I was planning about 25 grand rehab. It was a very light rehab. This house needed like paint, maybe new carpet. We didn't actually replace the carpet. I was trying to go as cheap as possible, so I was going 25 grand. Jesus, who usually comes, he painted the whole house, and then he convinced me to paint the exterior too, which now I'm debating if it was worth it, but the house sold, so.
It looks good.
So that was my biggest expense. It was a 4,500 square foot house. And I know a lot of people want to go, like, I was looking at mobile homes to flip. We almost bought one at the beginning of the year. But when I got this bigger home, I was like, well, the margin's so big, maybe just spending more means a bigger margin. So I think a lot of times we want to go on small deals because we're nervous and scared, but to me, it's just like if the numbers make sense, go for it. And be very careful on your numbers. Because there's people that want to partner with me and flip. I'm like, well, you realize that you like the holding costs, the utilities, the other agents that you're going to have to buy, the closing costs on both ends. Like, I don't think most people realize all the costs that go into it. So we bought it in actually July 4th because my wife was having our baby, and I would go check, like the flip house was super close to the hospital up in South Ogden. I would go over to the house and just kind of work on things and be like, hey, let me know like if I need to come. During labor.
Hey, let me know when you get close. I'll slow down.
You gave me permission though. So it took us, oh man, I want to say 3 months. And I would say the biggest mistake I made was letting my wife walk through the house before I started because the lady left all of her clothes, and they were like really nice clothes, like Victoria's Secret. She actually had shoes still being shipped to the house. And we're like, we don't know where she is. And we'd open them and they're $100 shoes. Like, we'd Google them. She's like, she's still, like, these are nice little gifts as we're rehabbing this house. So anyways, my wife walked through it and was like, you needed to garage sell, not just throw this away. And I said, no, let's just throw it away, please. But that was probably like the most work myself that I did, because like getting all that stuff into the garage and then advertising for a garage sale. My mom came and helped that day. We sold everything for $1. So it was a feeding frenzy, and we made maybe $400, but the amount of time that it took, I would have rather spent a week rehabbing the house. And then contractors, I felt like I had enough connections. I text Brett a million times asking different questions. Tyler Gray, I asked a bunch of questions. And so I think an art to it, and I think these guys have mastered it, is having a crew that you can just come in, tell what to do, and trust. Because I felt like I was babysitting contractors, and maybe it's because it was my first one, but I like kept going back just to make sure we're there. And here's a perfect example. A guy, I hired him to do little tiny touch-up jobs like trim, drywall, put a door stop, like little stuff. And the guy above him actually did all the landscaping, and so he's like, this guy's great. I get there at 9 a.m. I was like, hey, when's your guy coming? He's like, oh, he'll be there in an hour. The guy didn't show up till noon. When he showed up, he brought his wife. I'm like, okay, maybe she's helping him. And so they start working, and I'm like, here's what you need to do. Like, I got to run to Home Depot real quick and pick some stuff up. I go to Home Depot for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and come back, and he's gone. And everything that he did was wrong. Like, so I text the guy above him, like, don't have your guy come back. He did everything wrong. Now I have to hire somebody else to come fix it. And he was here for maybe an hour or 2 hours. Okay, so that wasn't the only guy I fired, but that's a lot of time. Like, each day on that house, I think cost me $200,000 on my hard money loan. Or sorry, not $200,000, $200.
Expensive money.
So it came out to like $5,000 a month is what that house was costing me. So like time's ticking. But had I saved that from terrible contractors and then I got to go find a new one, that would have saved me a lot of headache and time. And I did some of the work myself, but I feel like I killed myself, and I don't have the right tools, so I had to go buy tools at Home Depot. I don't know what I'm doing on most of it, so I'm watching YouTube to try and do it myself. And honestly, I would have just hired everything out. So I was there late one night, probably midnight, and I was going to keep the master bathroom how it was, but there was a pipe that I could not figure out how to undo the bolt, and it was this weird old pipe. I text Cody. Cody put in butcher block downstairs for me. But I was like, dude, what's going on here? And then I text my grandpa, because my grandpa is a general contractor. I text one other person. It's like, you got to cut it. I was like, well, I don't have the tools. So I'd worn myself out. I'd spent probably all day there. Probably got there at 9 and was there till midnight. I'm like, screw it. I'm redoing the whole bathroom. I hate this bathroom anyways. It looks like crap. And I had these other guys that did the shower and left these little pieces off and said, oh, this is easy. This is what you need to do. And I thought, why don't you do it? If it's so easy, why don't you do it? I'm paying you. Why are you asking me to do what I hired you to do? So that's your idea of contractors. Not all of them, but like I would say a majority of them are sloppy, and that's why you do so well. And Bruce came in and saved the day, and he did everything else from that point on for me, because he communicated, he was there on time, he did what I asked, he was upfront about costs. I'm like, this is a breeze. So I think the biggest headache for me was contractors, like finding good contractors. And my grandpa's been a contractor. My grandpa's my hero. He built his own construction company, retired at a young age, and then he was so bored he got back into commercial real estate. And that was really my first introduction to real estate, was in high school. I had a job shadow day and went and followed him and my uncle at a building in Ogden. And when I did the job shadow thing, I was like, this is so boring, I don't want to do this. But my grandpa has always talked to me about contractors and how they'll ask for money up front with the job not being done. And so I think growing up with him as a mentor and my personal hero helped me be able to fire those contractors faster than try and give them a second chance over and over and over. So I want to get into the numbers of the deal real quick. Are there any questions yet?
Well, I would ask one before you leave that subject then. You learned a lot through the process, but do you think you would have learned everything you learned had you not gone through the hardships of the deal?
No.
Like having to fire a contractor, like that. I always tell people that's part of learning, right? And it sucks, but you learn from it. What's your take on that now? I mean, I know that you can say, okay, I would have done this looking back, and that's something now you've learned, but you also learned the process, right? You learned what has to happen and what has to happen first and who has to be here first, and right? You learn the order of things by being there on site and being involved.
Yeah, I think just taking imperfect action, like even in Pace Morby's group, he has 14,000 people in there, and he says about 20, well, probably less than 20% actually pick up the phone. See you, Jeremy. So it's like some of us, I don't know if in this room, but like people pay a bunch of money to get into his group, and then they can't even pick up the phone because they're so scared. So I think it goes back to like, I put earnest money down and I didn't even have a lender. So it forces you to go out and start making those connections. Like I had been coming here, but I never talked to a lender, and maybe I do stuff backwards, but it's like once I have to do it, then I'll actually start having those conversations. And so a lot of the time people ask in this group, how do you go to a house and figure out rehab costs? And a lot of the time the answer is, well, it's deal by deal and you kind of just got to go through it. Like every house is so different. Mine was a light rehab. Something might need a full gut job. So it's like, I don't know. I haven't seen the house. I don't know how much it would cost to rehab. So once you get into it, you get the idea of how much things cost, and even just asking contractors, like, how much would you charge for this? And then maybe shopping the price with different contractors. Oh, here's a cheaper one, but just because he's cheaper, he might do the worst work in the world, and it's not worth saving money because now I just wasted a bunch of time. Is that fair? So I bought the house.
Question back here, George.
Go ahead.
Hey, so here's my question for you and for Brett. So Brett, you said Brett walked through the house.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have any experience with this stuff at all, right? So when I think of getting ballsy and saying, I'm gonna buy me a flip home one day, I'm looking for your Midvale house, right? The one that you completely are tearing apart right now, right?
The Mill Creek?
Isn't that, or whatever the.
Mill Creek,
whatever
yeah.
one that is, didn't that one get gutted pretty much?
Yeah. And we
That's
put a
where my
kitchen
head
in.
always goes. So why, Jordan, did you walk through that house and think it was a deal? And Brett, why didn't you offer on it if it was? Because like when I saw you buy it, Jordan, I'll be honest, I've known you forever. I thought you were crazy. Like this house is nice. Like it's not like crazy nice, but it's already nice. So like, what was the thought process when you walked through that home? And then Brett, maybe why didn't you offer on that? I'm just curious.
I knew the area enough. South Ogden, there's $1 million homes next to it. So to me, it's like 600 grand is a deal in this neighborhood for the size. And then the margin on it, once I ran my numbers, was big enough. I'm like, I feel comfortable taking this one down. I don't know if I think about Brett not buying it too sometimes, but I think like Brett does really high end stuff. And so in my mind, when I walked it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to try and keep as cheap as possible. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think Brett walks it. He's like, I got to replace all the the handrails were 3 stories of wood. In his mind, he would have replaced it, right? Because he came and walked it when we were done with rehab. I'm like, be picky, tell me everything. And how much would a handrail like that cost to replace?
Depending on what you did it out of, but as big as that was, yeah, probably 10 to 15 grand for what I would have done.
So that's 10 grand that I didn't spend. And then when he walked, he's like, I would have replaced every single door to a new door. I didn't do that. So it's like, it depends on the quality you want. Obviously, it's in a nice neighborhood, so I wanted it to be as nice as possible. But it's like, I still feel like with the handrails and the doors, someone will buy it. If Brett did that and it cost him more, he may have got that on the sales price to make up for it. But where I was, it was my first one, and I didn't want to overspend and be stuck.
I actually think Jordan did a really good job with this flip on his.
Oh, I wasn't saying you wasn't. I thought so.
His tactics were good and it worked clearly. Yes, my preference is to go in and I like the house to look brand new, everything. So I can't stand a 6-panel door. That's just me, right? Caleb loves them. He keeps them on every house. I can't stand them. I think it dates the home. It's just a personal preference for me. So when I go in, yes, I budget for all those things. I personally like a buyer to walk in and feel like they're walking into a brand new house. Jordan looked at it and said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to fix the things that has to be fixed, right? And it worked. I was nervous for him, okay, for a couple reasons. One, that house had been already listed on the market, and that was the first thing that scared me away from it because it wasn't in terrible condition, right? It wasn't like a lot of the houses I walk are a lot of times full guts and start over again, right? And so knowing that one was a house that had already been listed, that didn't sell as is, it made me nervous from that standpoint, right? So I didn't like that. Knowing the money I would have to put into it to make it the way I like to do a house, right? It didn't fit my criteria and my buy box. And that's something we were talking about in here last week. Like everybody, you can send, 10 different flippers or go to the same house and every one of them's rehab budget's gonna be a completely different number, right? And so it's one thing that bothers me when wholesalers and realtors send out deals and they say, oh, your rehab's about 30 grand or your rehab's 50 grand, and it's like, there's no chance, on a lot of these deals. But I don't know what you ended up spending. That's something you're going to get into probably. But again, Jordan saw that, hey, there's potential here. If I just fix this, and this, I think this thing can still sell for it. Now, maybe, again, does a little bit more. He could have get a little bit more on the back end, but the way he did it worked because he didn't go crazy with the rehab. He kept it light and obviously made it work, right? And fixed the things that were keeping probably other buyers when it had been on the market previous, fixed those things that mattered so that it would still sell. So again, I actually give him a ton of props for the way he did it and the way he went about it. It's just not the way that I typically try to do things.
Yeah, but I mean,
So.
I know me, George. I didn't mean to make it sound like I didn't.
No, I don't think,
Like,
no.
What did you see? put it up on Facebook as you were doing that. I'm like, what is he seeing that I'm not? Because that house already looks so nice.
Well, one other.
But it's a nice home, so I was like, what's he gonna do to flip? I didn't see it. And so hearing what you said about Brett, I was like, what was the thought process for both of you?
One other thing, as Brett was just talking about that I forgot to mention. One, I'm a licensed realtor, so I can sell it, and that saved me about 18 grand.
Yeah.
The other thing though is, I think when I text you, you did express that concern that it had been sitting, and I actually had the same concern. So I called the agent. I said, hey, can you tell me why this has been sitting for so long? And she said, oh yeah, it's because they won't let us show it.
And that's a
And-
great lesson. He just taught me something right there.
So-
right? I didn't make that phone call. He got the deal and it worked. If that's why it sat for so long, beautiful.
And I met the owner 3 times, and like, it was so hard to actually go. Once I was under contract, I was like, can I just come see it once again? And they're like, oh, she's busy, or it's like some dumb excuse. And so that made me feel comfortable with it. But the agent also said, oh, we've already been under contract, and they tried to do an inspection, and the homeowner wouldn't let them do the inspection. So those were the 2 things that were like, okay, it hasn't been shown, and it was under contract, and she didn't let them do an inspection. So like, if I was a buyer, I would back out too, if you won't let me do an inspection.
How long
And-
was it on the market?
Do you remember?
I remember. It had been a while.
Yeah.
3 months.
And it
Feels
had
like-
multiple agents
What
listed
was the
too.
reason for no inspection? Why wouldn't they?
Just
allow-
because that lady was crazy. I don't know.
They didn't want to sell it.
Well, I think she did, but
She did.
I
She's
think
going
she
back
knew
and
there were little things wrong, and in her mind they were probably bigger. This is what I think. They were bigger than what she thought, and so she thought if an inspector comes through, it's going to kill the deal. And so, I don't know. Sellers are freaking crazy. People are crazy.
How did you get an inspection done then if she didn't let you?
I didn't.
You did.
No, because when you buy through a wholesaler, the wholesaler had the the most basic inspection. So they sent it, but it was 1 page with like no information. And so I just said, okay, I feel like the house is in good enough condition. I'll take a chance. So when we got in, I had to replace the furnace upstairs. They had a AC furnace upstairs that wasn't running, so the house was super hot. When you know, like the second level gets super hot. And so I had an AC guy come out, and he was there for hours. And I'm like, dude, I can't replace it. Just figure, there's something. So he got up in the attic, he's like, oh, I found it. It was a loose wire. He just reconnected the loose wire and it worked. So if that lady probably thought she needed a new AC, is why I say it. And that's, I don't know, how much is a new AC?
3 to 5 grand, depending on what it was.
Okay, so that was a big cost that was unexpected. The sprinkler system, there was like a filter. I don't know if I'm saying this right. There was a filter on it that was busted. And so when you turn the sprinklers on, it was just spewing right at the main source. And so that was another big expense. I mean, it was like $1,000 maybe to fix, so it wasn't terrible. But I'll go through numbers real quick so people can get out of here. $600,000 for the 2 or to purchase. The loan so I had a hard money loan for $557,000. No, sorry, that's the payoff. I had to get the gap money had to be like $82,000 for the down payment, which I didn't have $82,000, so that was the gap. That cost me like 20% annually in interest, and then the hard money loan was 12% annually with no payments. So
Any points
2 points.
on both? On your gap too?
I don't know on the gap. I know on the hard money. I think there was just like a flat fee on the gap.
Okay.
So the payoff amount after that, I basically spent, it cost me $61,400 in interest and fees just to lend the money or to borrow the money. Does that make sense?
How much did it cost?
61,000.
Your mom's like,
So, yeah, there's a number like when you think, oh, that's a flip. It's like, okay, well, how much is it going to cost me just to borrow the money? Or do you have cash and you're amazing, most people don't, I don't think, because it's a huge risk to do cash.
Even if you do, don't use your own money.
Yeah. Rehab and holding cost was about double. I was thinking it would cost $25,000. It cost me about 45 grand between rehab and holding costs. Holding meaning like utilities, insurance, yeah. And then once we went under contract, I had it listed at $875,000. Has anyone seen the picture of me holding my 102 grand check? Yeah. Does anybody think that I kept all that? Okay. So had I sold it for $875,000, I would have pocketed 100 grand. But we had to keep lowering the price, and we lowered it all the way to $824, so 50 grand off what my original price was. The reason I went that high, actually before I got the deal, I'm like, this will sell for 800 grand for sure. Like, that's what I felt. So I'm like, that's what I felt comfortable with. The house directly behind me, like it touched our backyard, was listed while I was flipping it, and I went through their open house just to check it out, and it was all outdated, and they had listed it for $850,000. So I was like, sweet. So that's why I listed it at $875. It sat for a few months. I can't remember the exact amount of days, but we finally got it under contract for $815,000. And this was a Redfin agent that called me and said, hey, I've got a unique situation with my buyer. She just inherited a bunch of money. Her credit is shot, so she actually, to purchase your house, has to get a hard money loan. I'm like, oh, shoot. And then after she gets her credit back up, she's going to refinance out of it. I'm like, well, cool. I hope that works for her. All I care about is if it's going to close. Is it actually going to close? So I called the hard money lender that was lending it. He said, yes, this is actually what we're doing. We're lending her money to get a hard money loan, which I think she's nuts doing. Hopefully she gets her credit up. So the house might be back on the market soon. So I made sure with the lender, like, is this a solid deal? And so that's why I was so nervous too. Like, I hope it closes. I don't want to like start celebrating before. So it did close. We went under contract for $815, but she asked for $25,000 in closing costs to help pay for the fees that it was going to cost her to get a hard money loan. So I basically said, well, they asked for it and I agreed to it because I'm like, I got to get rid of this house. So really we sold it for about $790,000 if you take those closing costs out. So $45,000 for rehab and holding, another $25,000 asked for by the buyer's agent, and then I had to pay the buyer's agent $18,000 in her commissions as well. So all in all, I know you guys saw the $102,000 that I posted. I did that on purpose for marketing, right? But I had, like Jeremy, he just left. He's like, so how much did you actually pocket? $5? And so what I actually profited from that deal was $58,000. Sorry. So it was one of the most stressful things I've ever been through. And it wasn't just because of that one, but I'm partnered on another one that I partnered on before this one. So I had two. I told my wife, I'm like, I'm in the most debt I've ever been in. We didn't have money already, and we may have to file for bankruptcy and lose our house. Like, there were literally nights like that, and I couldn't sleep, and there was plenty of tears between the both of us, and fights and stress. So it's like, I know you see the 58,000, but like, I think that's when people just jump into it. Like, you got to be aware of everything you're taking on. And I didn't understand, and now I know, so it's like the next one will be easier, but people always say your first one is the hardest, and I agree.
Know your numbers, but I love the thing that you just keep saying. This has kind of been the theme for me of imperfect action. And we are out of time, so I want to like kind of close this off, but I want to ask one more question in regards to that, okay? You first met Devin years ago. You look at properties with him 5 years ago. You go through all the stuff you have. You've been coming to this for a year. I've seen you at you joined Pace Morby's group prior to that. I met you at another meetup, 2 or 3 years ago. All these things that have been coming on, and you've been learning. And there's a lot of people in this space who they think they have to know everything before taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep talking about just taking that imperfect action. What finally got you to take that step into imperfect action? That's the takeaway I want to get out of all this, because you've had all this history of learning, and then you finally took the action. What caused that?
Yeah. If you have to leave, please. I knew I was going to miss some stuff. So when I got into real estate, I asked my grandpa, like, what advice do you have being in real estate? He did commercial, but he's like, just stay in it for 5 years. Just stay in it for 5 years and you'll find your way or what you want to do in real estate. And I've experimented so much on different stuff, especially shiny object syndrome. Like, there's so many ways to make money in real estate. That's been my problem, is I get sidetracked and get off, and then I'm not focused on one thing. But when I was going through my brain injury, or after my accident, I started looking for brain injuries because they're so different, and like my personality changed. Some days my brain's foggy and I can't think straight, or I have headaches, or I can't remember certain things that have happened. And my wife's like, yeah, we actually did that. So I injured this area of my brain, and when I injured it, I had been in sales. I didn't talk about that, but since high school, I started selling Cutco knives in people's houses. And I had built those skills up. I'd knocked doors for multiple summers of just talking to people, and my social skills and negotiation skills. And I took a brain test after my accident, and there was pictures of people's faces, like, is this person happy, sad, anxious? And I just bombed it. Like, it was the worst part. So it was like something that I was so good at, of just like reading someone's facial expression or body language, I could no longer do. So for the past 5 years, I've had to work on it, and I've always been social, but even when there was like more than 2 people in a group, like say all of us were in a group talking, I couldn't follow the conversation, and I didn't know when to interject or when to not talk. So like I would talk over people, and then I'm like, oh shoot, that was rude. But I wouldn't notice until I'd go in my car, get home, like, that was awful. Like I felt like a nervous teenage girl, right? And so it's been a real struggle. Like, there's days I have to just mourn who I used to be a lot, because I can remember who I used to be, but I don't function like that person anymore. And so this is one other thing that was like so special to me. We had this ugly like stair nose that had to be replaced, and I went to Home Decor multiple times to try and find the piece, and Home Depot. Nobody found the piece, or had the piece. I put 2 in that didn't match. It looked awful. And so my grandpa just recently he rode horses, and he has a barn out back, and he turned his horse stalls into a wood shop. And so I reached out to him and said, Grandpa, could you build me this custom piece? It's the last thing I need for this house. And he said, yeah. So here's a picture of him installing it. And
Good deal.
I don't think he noticed, or I don't think he realized, but I said, Grandpa, can I take a picture of you? And he said, just look up. And when he gets to working, he doesn't stop. So he's like, I just said, just look up and let me take a picture of you. So I took a picture. And the 5 years, I had heard a podcast of this guy that had a brain injury. He could barely speak. And then I found him on another one with a TBI. He had fallen off. He had fallen off scaffolding and had a brain injury. And he spoke completely differently. Like, you could barely understand what he was saying. And then 5 years later, he was like speaking so eloquently. And the advice my grandpa gave me of just stay in real estate for 5 years was actually the advice I was giving myself on my brain injury that no one knew about, because I had listened to that podcast and I said, if I can make it to 5 years, I can do what that guy did. He was way worse than me and he's okay. And this picture is on the exact day, September 2nd, of my accident 5 years ago. And it was the finishing piece. It was a finishing piece on my flip. And like this picture will mean everything to me for a long time, because it took a lot of hard work, not just to find the flip and do the flip, but just to recover from a brain injury when you think that you should be dead or you can't walk or you should be a vegetable. And that's honestly that was the message I was hoping to convey. Like, I know everybody has something that they struggle with or have gone through, and you get to the point where you question whether life's worth living or what's the point. And there's always a way out of the darkest moments. And I thought my parents' divorce was one of the darkest moments until I had my own personal accident, and had kids that I had to look at wondering if I could take care of them. So thank you guys all for listening to me ramble on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. Wow, inspirational story. I'm so grateful to hear all the things. Like, there was a lot of nuggets in there. So any of you that are, I don't care what it is you're trying to do. Again, I mean, I started this saying, hey, no great things in life come without risk, right? You fall in love, you're at risk, right? Like, anything takes risk. And to accomplish big things in life and in business, you got to take risks. And I'm super proud of this kid for stepping up, taking a risk, and seeing the reward. And I hope you keep doing it.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's stressful risk.
Yeah.
Again, thank you all for being here. Bill, you will be here for the next